Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we tackle your questions, dig into the sources you send us, and try to pull out the most essential and sometimes surprising insights. Today, we're diving into something I think a lot of us have wondered about, that idea of a shortcut. Specifically, can language learning, maybe learning English, be truly effortless with something called passive listening? And the really big one, can we actually learn while we're asleep?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're aiming to unpack in this deep dive. We'll look at what passive listening really is when we talk about learning a language. We need to get past some common ideas, maybe misconceptions, and see what it actually helps with, and importantly, what it doesn't. And then, we'll tackle that big sleep learning question head on using what we found in the sources. Plus, we've got some really practical tips, I think, for getting the most out of language exposure. It's about being smart with your time, but, keeping it real about what to expect.
Okay, so let's just jump right in then. That whole idea of effortless passive listening while you're, dreaming away. It sounds amazing, right? Literally a dream scenario. But is it? I mean, is it just too good to be true?
Well, look, when it comes to learning a language like English, from scratch,
Yeah.
while you're asleep, the sources are pretty clear.
Yeah.
No, that's not really how it works. Your brain, during sleep, its main job is consolidating memories, taking stuff you learned when you were awake and, filing it away properly.
Right.
And deep rest, obviously. It's not really set up for acquiring complex new things like language skills. There was even an experiment mentioned in your sources that was called very deceiving, so it probably gave people the wrong idea. Real language learning, the kind that gets you understanding and speaking and needs you to be conscious, paying attention, engaging with it, and you just don't have that when you're asleep.
Right, so no waking up fluent in Mandarin next week then? That's, okay, a bit of a bummer. But I thought I saw something in there, a hint about maybe recall. Like it wasn't completely useless. Can you explain that a bit? Why is active learning so much more important than whatever might happen during sleep?
Yeah, you picked up on that nuance, and it's a fair point. Recognizing sounds isn't understanding meaning, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But one study did sort of suggest that maybe listening to audio tapes while sleeping might give a very, very small boost, specifically for recalling vocabulary you've already learned, stuff you
Ah,
actively studied when you were awake. Think of it like maybe refreshing existing memories a tiny bit, not
yeah.
learning new stuff from zero. It's more like quickly glancing at flashcards you already know, maybe. Not trying to learn brand new words in a language you don't speak at all.
Okay, so a tiny potential refresher, but not actual earning.
Exactly. And honestly, the bottom line here is that a good night's sleep is just way more valuable. Your brain needs that rest to properly process everything you learned actively during the day. It gets you ready for more learning tomorrow. Playing audio while you sleep probably won't hurt your language skills unless, and this is a big one, it messes with your sleep quality. If it's too loud or keeps waking you up, that's definitely counterproductive. But don't count on it as a main learning strategy. Focus on getting good, solid rest.
That makes total sense. You need your brain to be, awake and ready for learning. So, okay, if sleep learning is basically a myth, that brings us back to this term passive listening. What is it really in the context of language learning? Because like you said, the term itself can be confusing. Normally, passive listening sounds kind of negative, right? Like you're not paying attention.
That's a great point, and yeah, that's where the confusion often comes in. In everyday situations like a meeting or just chatting with someone,
Hmm.
saying someone is passively listening usually means they're checked out, disengaged. They might be hearing the sounds, but they're not really processing it, maybe not making eye contact. They'll forget it later. And yeah, that can definitely make the speaker feel ignored.
Yeah, like someone scrolling through their phone while you're talking, definitely not helpful.
Exactly that.
Yet.
For language learning, the definition we're using is different. It's quite specific. Passive listening here means hearing the language you say around you, but without actively trying to understand every single word or sentence. There's a degree of mental disengagement from the meaning, if that makes sense. The language is more like background sound while you focus on something else. Think listening to English music while you're driving, or having an English podcast on while you're, I don't know, doing dishes or jogging. You're not stopping to look things up. You're just letting the sounds, the rhythm wash over you.
Ah, okay. So it's not about disrespect, it's a specific technique. Low effort exposure. And that's different from active listening when you're trying to learn.
Absolutely different. Active listening for language learning demands your full focus. Your attention is on. You're deliberately trying to understand. You're figuring out what words mean, maybe pausing to check a dictionary or think about the grammar. That's deep processing. So yeah, passive listening has these two meanings. For this deep dive, we're focused only on the language learning definition, the potentially useful one.
Got it. That clears things up a lot. So now that we know what it is, let's talk about the payoff. What can this method actually do for someone trying to learn English? What are the real upsides?
Okay, yeah, there are some pretty compelling upsides, which is why it's seen as such a useful supplementary tool. First big one, time maximization. This is huge. Passive listening lets you weave language exposure into things you're already doing. Those everyday kind of mindless tasks,
Yeah.
like we said, commuting, cooking, cleaning, working out, times when your brain isn't super taxed, but your ears are free. One source actually pointed out that the average American spends over 600 hours a year just driving.
Wow, 600 hours.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. That's like taking 2 months off work, 8 hours a day, just for language exposure.
Right.
If you use that driving time, it's incredible potential.
That's a massive amount of time you could be using. Okay, what else?
Well, even if you're not understanding everything, your brain starts getting used to the sounds of English, the patterns, the intonation, how it flows. This builds what one source called an important foundation for your language skills. Your brain gets better at just recognizing the sounds, how they fit together. It's like acclimatizing your ear, laying down the basic tracks.
Soaking up the music of the language, like you said, getting attuned.
Exactly. It primes your ear. And related to that, it helps you get more familiar with pronunciation, the rhythm, the cadence of native speech. Over time, this can subtly help your own accent and how natural you sound. Then there's vocabulary reinforcement and even cultural acclimation. If you're listening to English through, say, movies or TV shows or podcasts, even passively, you'll hear words you already learned, but in new situations. That reinforces them. You might even pick up some new words just from the context, especially if you occasionally glance at subtitles or see what's happening on screen. Plus, you absorb little bits of culture, common phrases, jokes, how people interact.
That's interesting, that sort of subconscious absorption. You mentioned it going into the back of your brain.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like your brain is doing some quiet prep work in the background. It's building these subtle connections, kind of priming your unconscious mind. So later, when you are actively studying or you're in a conversation, that information feels a bit more familiar, easier to grab onto. It lowers the effort needed later. And, just making English a regular part of your day, something that's just there, can really boost your motivation. It feels less like a chore. Plus, let's be honest, it's rarely 100% passive, is it? Your attention drifts. You'll catch a word here, a phrase there. You get these little moments of active engagement naturally.
Okay, that all sounds genuinely useful, actually. Maximizing time, getting your ear tuned, reinforcing vocab, maybe even staying motivated. But, all right, here comes the but. There have to be limits, right? What can it do? Why isn't this the magic solution all by itself?
Right, the caveats are really important here. While it's helpful, you have to understand that there's really no such thing as truly passive language learning if you want to become conversationally fluent. Passive listening just can't replace the essential stuff. You absolutely have to practice speaking. You need to actively study vocabulary and grammar to understand meaning properly, to form your own sentences, to actually use the language. Just relying on passive listening alone, that would be, as one source put it, a huge mistake for fluency.
Okay, so it won't teach you how to speak or understand grammar rules just by osmosis.
Exactly. And it's much less efficient than active learning. Way less efficient. Think about it. You might need, many hours of passive listening to get the benefits of a single hour of active learning.
Active study is just certainly more effective because you're making your brain work directly with the material, connecting ideas, retrieving things from memory. That builds understanding much faster. If you want to grasp the meaning, not just the sounds, you need to pay at least some attention. If your brain is totally tuned out, the benefit for comprehension is going to be pretty minimal. It's an add-on, a great one, but not a replacement. It prepares the soil maybe, but it doesn't plant the seeds or grow the plant.
Right, got it. A powerful bonus, a background boost, but not the main engine. So if we accept that it's a supplement, how do we really make the most of it? How can listeners best leverage passive listening to supercharge their English learning? Got any practical tips? Yeah, definitely. It's all about smart integration. First, like we've been saying, consciously build it into your daily routine. Identify those mindless, mundane activities. Commuting, that subway time means time for foreign language podcasts. Idea is great. Cooking, cleaning, exercise, even showering for some people. These are hours you're already spending. Optimize them. Put English audio on.
Turn downtime into found learning time. Makes sense.
Second, choose the right stuff to listen to. Music, movies, TV, podcasts, great. But, and this is important, pick things that are roughly at your level, or maybe just slightly above. If it's way too hard, your brain will just filter it out as noise, too easy, and you're not really stretching yourself. Aim for something where you can kind of follow the general idea, even if you miss words. That allows for those little moments where your attention might catch something interesting.
Okay, so find that sweet spot. Challenging, but not impossible.
Exactly. Third tip, and this one's quite clever, I think. Change your language settings. On your phone, your computer, maybe even the ATM you use or info screens at the station. Switch the interface language to English. Now, this isn't purely passive. You do have to engage when you use the device, but it turns these tiny, everyday interactions into mini lessons. You're forced to figure it out to get things done. And consider this. The average person apparently touches their phone over 2,600 times a day. That's potentially thousands of extra little nudges in English every single day.
Whoa, 2,600 times. That's a lot of micro practice opportunities built right in. That initial frustration forces you to learn it quickly, too.
It really does. That need to accomplish a task is a strong motivator. Fourth, there's the classic, the good old Post-it trick. Stick labels on things around your house or office with their English names. Takes a bit of effort up front, sure. But once they're up, you see refrigerator, desk, window, constantly as you go about your day. It passively reinforces vocabulary through sheer repetition and association with the real object.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Simple, but probably really effective for basic nouns.
It is surprisingly effective. And finally, maybe the most important point. Remember that while passive listening is a fantastic bonus, the real heart of learning a language successfully is finding ways to make the active parts enjoyable. Passive listening is the support crew, the background music. Your main focus should be on active study, practice, conversation, finding ways to make that engaging and fun. Passive listening just helps create this rich, English-filled environment around you that supports everything else.
Okay, so pulling this all together for everyone listening, what does this really mean for your journey, especially with language learning? It seems pretty clear. The dream of learning fully in your sleep. Mostly a myth, unfortunately. But the power of passive listening, if you use it smartly, is actually very real.
Well,
It's about tweaking your environment, your existing habits, to soak up more English without adding a huge burden, turning those dead moments into learning moments.
exactly. And that actually leads to a bigger thought, doesn't it? If our brains can get used to sound patterns and absorb bits of language just by having it around, what other parts of your everyday environment, maybe beyond language, could you subtly change or re-engineer to support other learning goals you might have? What seemingly small background things could actually become these powerful, almost effortless learning opportunities for you? Something to think about.